Good morning. This is Ann LaCesta, and I'm going to be talking you through the 1 to 4 family residential contract. This is a great resource for you on your very first contract, or should you find yourself in a contract situation. This recording will actually help you understand how the contract is to be used. So here we go. The first blank. The parties to this contract are blank seller and blank buyer. So let me assure you that the seller listed on the tax records is almost always correct, but not always. The other danger zone is divorcing couples. Very frequently, one party believes they have title to the home, but they did not actually go and record it at the county as separate owners or one owner. So you actually do have to be very careful about who the sellers actually are. And your buyer, you need to write your buyer's legal name so that this is a legal, binding, enforceable contract. Then in section 2, lot, block, the name of the subdivision, the city of, the county of, and known as. That will be most of what you do. This last blank is for the zip code. This will be most of what you do. Is suburban. It'll be in a subdivision. This will be a lot of what you do. You will occasionally do something that has only a plat, only a lot plat, crazy kind of country definition of property. Whatever you know, whatever you find on the tax records, whatever you know is a description. If you do not have lot block, that's okay. Put the best legal description possible in the known as blank right here. You want to put the best legal description possible. Notice that in paragraph B, it exactly states what stays with the property. This is real property, including and without limitation. The following permanently installed and built-in items. So don't ask questions about what stays with the house. This is permanently installed and built-in appliances, valances, screens, shutters, awnings, wall-to-wall carpeting, mirrors, ceiling fans, television antennas. Yes, they stay. Attic fans. Yes. Mounts and brackets for televisions and speakers. So yes, the mounts and brackets stay. Heating and air conditioning units, security and fire detection equipment. Yes, they stay. Garage door openers stay. Cleaning equipment, shrubbery. If they were going to take their grandma's azalea bush, they need to exclude it down here. Notice also that accessories stay with the home and they are clearly laid out. Fireplace screens, curtains and rods, blinds, swimming pool equipment, maintenance accessories, artificial fireplace logs, and the controls for anything that needs controls. There shouldn't be very many questions about what stays with the property. Right here is where you put anything that is going with the seller that looks like it ought to stay, but is going with the seller. Don't think you're being all slick and sly to not resolve this at the time of the contract. That's not slick and sly. That's just putting off a problem. Go ahead and discuss it and make sure that any exclusions are on the contract. Cash portion payable by buyer at closing. Sum of all financing described. It is normally, almost all the time, if they're getting financing, it's going to be in this third-party financing addendum, which has a total financed amount here, total sales price here. License holder disclosure. So if you are the spouse, parent, child, or it's being bought in an LLC that you own more than 10% of, or if you are a trustee for a trust, then you need to disclose right here that the real estate agent, the licensed real estate agent, is the mother of the purchaser, or whatever needs to be disclosed right here. Earnest money goes in this blank, the amount. And people always want to know how much. It really varies according to the price point. And also, let me tell you that earnest money is very hard for a seller to get. So from a buyer's perspective, putting more earnest money down can make their offer attractive to the seller at actually very low risk for the buyer. So this is not a bad blank to increase the earnest money so that the seller is attracted to the offer, but actually it is easier for the buyer to get that back. This is the name of the title company as earnest money with. So you're going to put Allegiance, you're going to put lawyers, you're going to put whatever title company you use and their address. And then buyers shall deposit additional earnest money of blank with escrow agent within blank days. So this is very unusual to use. This can be used particularly if there are specific questions about zoning or the survey or you're a backup contract. All kinds of things could mean that you wanted an additional 20 days before you deposit some additional earnest money. It's possible, but highly unlikely. Title policy. Seller shall furnish to buyer at seller's expense or buyer's expense. Title policy. That is very negotiable. I would say seller's expense is customary, but in these days of multiple offers, it is not uncommon to check that the buyer will pay. This is a way to increase seller net, the net proceeds seller will walk away with, without increasing the sales price. So if you're worried about an appraisal, pay some of the expenses as opposed to increase the sales price, and that will get your offer accepted more likely. So issued by, this will be the same title company that you have up here. Whoever you have in paragraph 5, you'll have in paragraph 6. Notice that there are initials at the bottom that have to be finished. Should you make any change to the contract in writing, that change in the contract also has to be initialed. All right, we're going to go down and we're going to go to these blanks right here in paragraph C. This is paragraph 6C about the survey. Within blank days after the effective date of this contract, seller shall furnish to buyer an existing survey and a T47 affidavit. So one of the big questions that I hear is, do both sellers have to sign the T47? And in order for them to have actually provided an accurate T47 that stands up to all legal challenges, the answer is yes. Both sellers have to have signed that T47. If only one signer signs the T47, then this can be a way that the buyer can get out of the contract, because the buyer can say that an accurate T47, an enforceable T47, was not provided in the right number of days. So just to protect yourself, get all sellers to sign that T47. If the existing survey or affidavit is not acceptable to the title company or to the buyer's lender, buyer shall obtain a new survey at the seller or buyer's expense. Check one of these boxes. You need to check one of these. More likely than not, it's going to be the buyer's expense because it's the buyer's lender that's asking for a new survey. If no survey is available, you will check either 2, that the buyer is going to obtain and pay for a new survey, or 3, that the seller is going to obtain and purchase a new survey. Objections. So buyer can object to in writing to any defects, exceptions, or encumbrances to the title, and any prohibit the following use or activity. So if they plan to raise llamas, if they're going to have a ham radio station, if they need to build a full boat launch or something, there can be things that need to go here. A common one is swimming pool. So if the title or the survey or anything show that they can't put a swimming pool in, that might be a reason that they want to object. So you're either putting they're going to object there, and then after how many days after the buyer receives does the buyer waive their right to object. So you want to give your buyers a few days to look at this, to look over the title commitment and make sure whether they object to anything they see. All right, we're going on down. E2, membership in a property owners association. Super important. The property is or is not subject to a mandatory property association. This is a big deal to people. Some people will never buy a home that is not in a mandatory homeowners association. They want that mandatory homeowners association. They do not want cars on blocks in the front lawn. So they require a mandatory. Others will never buy a home that's in a mandatory homeowners association. They want to be able to build whatever they want to build on their property, and they don't want the government telling them what to do. So very important that you get this box correct. The property is or is not subject to a mandatory homeowners association. All right, we're going down. You can read all these parts. Should you have a specific question, I want to recommend that you read it. Read every word. Don't call and ask. Read every word. These bold words say, you are obligated to pay assessments to the Property Owners Association. The amount of the assessment is subject to change. Your failure to pay the assessments could result in enforcement of the association's lien or foreclosure of the property. That's very clear. That means if you don't pay those HOA dues, bad things can happen to you. There shouldn't be a lot of questions once you read the actual language in the contract. So we are going on down the contract, and we are going to go to paragraph 7. So paragraph 7 is that the seller shall have all the utilities on, and they are agreeing to that in this contract. So sellers will have the utilities on, and buyers will be able to access the property at reasonable times. Trust me, I understand that what is reasonable times can be misunderstood. Some sellers don't want the buyer in their house at all. Some buyers want in the house just all the time because they're shopping for furniture. So what we want is we want to set up some sort of a reasonable expectation with our client. You can go in the home for the inspection, and you should arrange to measure for the refrigerator and measure for that wall unit all during the inspection. If you're the seller's agent, you want to tell the seller's agent that the buyer has the right. Stop and talk to them. Yes, they can come in the home a couple of times to measure for things or to check things out. It is their right. Then in 7B, seller's disclosure notice. So either buyer has received the notice, which is very common, or buyer has not received the notice and wants to receive it. So you want to be sure that your buyer receives the seller's disclosure notice before conducting an inspection. So you only want to put 1 or 2 days here. If they can't give you the seller's disclosure notice within 1 or 2 days, then you want a very long option period, a 10-day, 12-day option period, because you want the seller's disclosure notice prior to conducting an inspection. All right? And then the seller is not required to furnish, so investors must furnish, right? Banks who foreclosed on a property do not have to furnish. Builders do not have to furnish. There are people who are not required to furnish a notice. All right, let's go down to D. We always want, as much as possible, we recommend that you check D1. Buyer accepts the property as is. And then D2 is buyer accepts the property as is, provided the seller at seller expense shall complete the following repairs. So as is means the present condition of the property. Notice it says the buyer's agreement to accept the property as is does not preclude the buyer from inspecting the property, from negotiating repairs, or from terminating during the option period. This really means nothing. I see what I see and I accept it the way it is. I like the house. I'm making an offer. You would only use D2 in very unusual circumstances. So here's what happens. If you're the buyer and you know you want new carpet, so you write in here, new carpet not to exceed $5,000. Well, the seller is now negotiating the sales price based on a repair that they know you're asking for. So the sales price is going to be lower, is going to be higher that they agree to. So your buyer is getting a higher price. Then your buyer is going to go back and ask for some other repairs that appear at inspection, and they're starting from a higher price point with an unhappy seller. Checking D1 means that once you have an inspection, you can prioritize what you ask for. At that time, you can ask for new carpet, you can ask for specific repairs, you can ask for whatever you want to, but you've negotiated the price separately. So that really works better for everyone. All right. Just looking at completion of repairs and treatments and lender required repairs and treatments, right? Lenders want the home in good condition when they make the mortgage. So there can certainly be foundation repairs, roofs, things that are required in order to get a mortgage. Notice that for the most part, you're just going to be talking about a seller completing repairs. So the seller shall complete all agreed upon repairs prior to the closing date. So the seller does not have to complete the repairs during the option period. They just they're required to complete them before closing, anytime before closing. They should provide you with receipts and any information about transferable warranties, and you should do a walkthrough and have your buyer sign a buyer's walkthrough and acceptance form, which says, I've looked at the receipts, I've had the opportunity to study the repair, and I accept it as it is. Then notice that all required repairs must be done by a licensed provider. So a plumber has to be a licensed plumber. Now, roofers are not licensed, so there's no license required. But if a license is required, the seller has to perform it by a licensed provider. Then we're going on down to H, to residential service contracts. So these are home warranties. It's another phrase for home warranties. And the seller shall reimburse buyer at closing for the cost of a residential home warranty. You want your buyer to choose the home warranty of their choice. We have lots of flyers to give them. You can send them links to websites and let them choose. And then you put the total amount that the seller is going to reimburse the buyer for the home warranty. In this market of multiple offers, it is not uncommon to put a zero there. And if your buyer wants to purchase a home warranty, they purchase a home warranty for themselves. The closing of the sale will be on or before this day. All right? So you're going to put the closing date there, on or before. Understand that if you close on a Friday afternoon at 3, the home will not close and fund on that day, because funding typically requires wires to be sent around the country and approvals to be received maybe from both coasts. So if you schedule a closing late in the day on a Friday, it's possible that the buyer may not move in until Monday, when the actual transfer, the closing and funding and the actual transfer of ownership occurs. So please be careful on what closing date you choose. All right. Possession. Oh, this is just a favorite. So upon closing and funding is by far the cleanest. That means that the seller has already moved out. The buyer has walked through a vacant home and has selected to proceed to closing. It's in decent shape, and close and fund, and then the buyer can move right in. If this is a domino transaction and someone has to sell before they can buy, someone has to move, there are a lot of times today that loans fall apart. There are a lot of times today that contracts fall apart at the last minute. Using a seller's temporary residential lease can be a great tool to avoid the high drama. I don't like drama. I don't like fire drills. And the seller's temporary residential lease that's negotiated at the offer time is a great tool to avoid fire drills. So that means that you're going to close and fund, and the seller has maybe as much as 2 or 3 days to move out after that. On the temporary residential lease, please put a time that the lease expires. So this lease expires on February 2nd at 5 o'clock p.m. That means the seller has to be out at 5 o'clock p.m. That means the buyer can have their moving stuff arrive at 5:30. So what I'm trying to tell you is, if you put February 2nd, in the buyer's mind, they think they're going to get to move in at noon on February 2nd. And in the seller's mind, they think they have till midnight on February 2nd. And this is when we end up with trouble, and somebody's in the garage and somebody's coming in the back door and the sheriff gets called. So please use a seller's residential lease as much as possible and put a time on that lease. All right. Special provisions. So you only want to put factual statements and business details. So, and you need to discuss it with one of our awesome attorneys and get a statement that applies specifically to this transaction. So special provisions can be having the house professionally cleaned upon move out. So the only people that can really add things here are the actual buyer or seller in their handwriting, or a factual statement, just a statement of fact. Please do not get caught trying to practice law here. All right. Settlement and other expenses. Here we go. This is the blank right here. You can see my red pointer. Seller shall also pay an amount not to exceed blank. So I want to be sure you understand how this is used. You should get this number from the lender every time. Because if the seller agrees to give $4,000 to the buyer, and then these fees that are allowable only add up to $3,000, the buyer does not get the benefit of that extra $1,000. That extra $1,000 is gone to the buyer. The seller agreed to pay these fees right here that are outlined, right? It's very detailed what buyers and sellers can pay. And so if you don't put the right amount in there, you can have the seller agreeing to pay $4,000 and then they only pay $3,000. So you've lost a $1,000 benefit for your buyer. So make sure you get this amount from the lender every time. All right, here we go. We're going down. Okay. When you're discussing the contract with your client, you are going to want to make sure they know to keep, if they're the seller, please keep your property insurance, your homeowner's insurance through not till closing day, but till a day or two after you have your money in the bank. You don't want the home to burn down on closing day and for the big discussion to be whose insurance covers. You want to have insurance so that the two insurance companies can fight it out as to who's responsible. Prorations, taxes, and homeowners' dues will be prorated at closing to the exact day that the seller owns and the buyer owns. All right, let's go on down. Then we're going to get to the notices section, to buyer at, to seller at. We do want for you to put some information for your client here, an email, an address, and you're welcome to put your information also, but we do not want or recommend that you put only your information. If an important document is sent only to you and you don't see it for a couple hours, worse, a couple days, then you could be caught in a very liable, a very responsible situation. Whereas if it goes to the buyer and to you, or to the seller and to you, then the seller receives the information the same time that you do, and you're not caught up in a liability mess. So we really want you to put their information here along with yours is fine. All right. It's important that you check the right box for any addendum that you add. Third-party financing is very common, and so you want to make sure that you check the box if that applies. Addendum for property subject to a homeowners association is very common. I hate buyers' temporary residential leases. Allowing a buyer to move in prior to closing is a really, really difficult idea. Very challenging. Buyers will move in. They will continue to request repairs. They will find things in the home they don't like. They are completely unmotivated to close at that moment in time. So be careful. Please don't use this form very often at all. Addendum for sale of other property by buyer is the contingency. If your buyer must sell their home, must receive the proceeds from their home in order to buy the next one, then you must use an addendum for sale of other property. To not use this form is to put your buyer at great risk. I understand that there are finance days and that they could have their financing unapproved if they don't sell their home. But I just went through this in a legal situation, and that is actually fraud, and it is proven fraud because your buyer did not represent their financial capabilities truthfully. So if they must sell their home in order to buy another home, you need to use the addendum for sale of other property by buyer. This is about oil and gas and other minerals. And so a lot of people in Flower Mound, particularly out west Flower Mound, have a lease on their oil and gas. This is a seller's temporary residential lease, which I hope you'll use a lot of, which allows the seller to stay a few days after closing. We're seeing fewer short sales right now, but there are some. So this could come up. Obviously, we don't work on the Intercoastal Waterway. This is about lead-based paint. So if the home was constructed in 1978 or before, you definitely are required to use this and the pamphlet that goes with it. And then if you're in an area, a subdivision that's served not by natural gas, but by a propane tank that's held somewhere in the community, then this is the appropriate addendum for that. Now we're moving on into the option period. So the seller is not going to like the option period when you explain it to them, right? Unrestricted right to terminate. The buyer can just wake up one day and decide, I don't want to buy this home, I terminate. They don't have to give an explanation. They don't have to do anything. So this is actually a big, big deal. For the seller to grant an option period is a big, big deal. So when you're representing the seller, you want as high an option fee as you can get. If you are the seller in a multiple offer situation, it is my opinion that a higher option fee is a great thing to negotiate, because that means that if the buyer walks away for any reason, your seller gets to keep that option fee. If you're a buyer's agent in a multiple offer situation, increasing the option fee can be a great way to get the contract, because if they don't get the contract, the option fee doesn't go anywhere. So the option fee only goes somewhere if their offer is chosen and the contract is executed. Yes, there is some risk. If the seller will not cooperate at all and they walk away based on repairs or something, then the buyer does lose the option money. They do. But I think it's a great conversation for you to be having with your clients. So seller, option fee. People say, what? I have personally not seen less than $100, and I've not seen more than maybe $1,200. I've seen some big ones recently, depending on the price of the home. And then days. So one of the secrets to how many days do you need is, can you get an inspector? So you always want to give the name of at least 3 inspectors, and no, you do not want to choose it for them. Please do not do that. Should they move into the home and have a problem, and you recommended or facilitated the choice of an inspector, that could lead to very bad responsibility for you, very big responsibility. So tell them they wouldn't be on your list if they weren't good, and you just recommend they call all 3. And I know that's a pain, but that's the market that we're in right now. And so, nope, I'm sorry, you need to at least call the top 2, the bottom 2, pick 2 to call, and choose the one you like the best. They're all great, or they wouldn't be on my list. And then put a number of days. 5 is about as short as I really see. 10 is about as long as I really see, unless there are some other parts to the story that require that it be shorter or longer. All right, and then the option fee will or will not be credited to the sales price at closing. So will is customary. So if I put down $200 option fee, I'm going to be credited for that when I go to close. But in this day of worrying about appraisals and multiple offers, it is also fine to check will not. So you put down $200 option fee, and then that's just a gift to the seller. That allows that seller to net $200 more without raising the sales price and risking that appraisal. So that can be a good strategy. Here we rarely have attorneys. I think that's a thank God thing. So it's rare to have attorney info to fill in, but you certainly may. This executed date is of unbelievable importance. So the executed date is the day the final initial on the final change to the contract is put into place. It is a great idea to have in writing in an email, hey, I just executed the contract. Wanted you to know that we executed today at 10 a.m. Tomorrow is day 1 of your option period. That's the way the counting works. That way there's no doubt in anyone's mind how the option period is going to work. We have a lot of fire drills and a lot of emergencies in our business because we don't do the details right. Execute on the right day. If you can't agree on the executed date, you can't agree on the day the option period ends. So you've already got a problem. So solve your problem up front by executing at the correct moment. Final signature, final initial, no more changes, execute. And I have sent you an email that says I've executed and tomorrow is day 1. So I've executed today at 10:11 a.m., February 1st. And so February 2nd is day 1 of the option period. Very important, very important, very important. Correct legal signatures apply here. Now let's go down to this part. If you are the seller, you are the seller only as seller's agent, unless the buyer also is represented by an agent out of this office. It's not any Keller Williams, it's only our office, because offices are independently owned and operated. So it is an intermediary transaction if both the seller and the buyer are represented by an agent in this office. Otherwise, it is buyer only as buyer's agent and seller only as seller's agent, with all of this information correctly filled out. Listing broker has agreed to pay other broker whatever they've agreed to pay of the total sales price. And then here's the option fee receipt and the earnest money receipt. Remember, back on option, I don't want there to be any doubt. Time is of the essence. The option fee must be delivered within 3 days. It doesn't say 3 business days. It doesn't say 3 days that you're happy. It doesn't. It says 3 days. That is 1 24-hour period, 2, 3. And when is day 1? It's the day after execution, right? Within 3 days after the effective date of this contract. So you must deliver the option period or you have no option. So it isn't that you don't have a contract. You do have a contract. You just have no option to terminate. No option at all. So it is a really big deal that you deliver that on time. And get it receipted. Yes, have someone actually sign and date and do it all so you can prove. And then this is for the earnest money receipt, which will be completed by the title company. And you need to drop that off in a timely manner. I know timely is not described legally in the contract, but do it promptly. And then you'll have a great signed, sealed, executed contract. All right. And remember that we have contract help for you here should you get into a sticky situation.